Welcome to Your Healthy Kitchen from Dignity Health Yavapai Regional Medical Center.
Welcome to Dignity Health, YRMC's Your Healthy Kitchen. I'm your host, Rita Carey Rubin. You know, one of the exciting things about nutrition science is the way it changes and expands as we learn more about the connections between food and health. And in recent years, some of the most impressive research has been in the area of mind and memory care. A number of large studies suggest that protein, healthy fats, fiber, and a variety of phytonutrients, or those chemicals that are concentrated in plants, are essential for healthy brains. So I'll be sharing some really intriguing theories on how food might support your brain and prevent dementia here today. But first, let's get cooking. I have a delicious recipe that supplies many of the healthy fats and other nutrients your brain needs to function well for a lifetime. So we're going to make a olive oil poached salmon and serve it on greens and with some wild rice on the side. And this recipe comes from one of my new favorite cookbook. It's called The Cook You Want to Be, and that's by Andy Baragani. And it's a really fun cookbook. His goal is to make it easy for anybody to create delicious, nutritious food in their own kitchens. He's an experienced chef, and he writes with a sense of humor. When you read his cookbook, it's like he's having a conversation with you. It's really fun. And I just have to share with you, when I first got this book, the first page I opened up to was this one. It says, "I heart my salad spinner." And he hooked me with that because I heart my salad spinner too. It's one of the best tools to have in the kitchen. So this comes from Andy, and in the cookbook he calls it Mom's Salmon, because it's his mom's recipe. So let's get cooking. So I've got some olive oil cooking here, heating up, and we're going to throw in some greens. And I have some lacinato kale. You can also use Swiss chard. And so easy green to cook. If you had a different kind of kale, like curly kale, it would take a little bit longer to cook. It's a little tougher greens, a little more strongly flavored, so I wouldn't use that. So if you use the kale, use the lacinato kale, or it's also I think it's called dino kale, or spinach would be great, or like I said, Swiss chard is awesome. So I've just got these leaves. I'm going to just roughly tear them. If you use the Swiss chard, you can finely chop the stems and throw those in first. But with the kale, it's not terribly exciting to eat kale stems. Like chard stems are actually pretty yummy. They're kind of sweet. So I'm just going to put in the leaves and simply wilt these down a little bit. And it's really fun. You just tear the leaves right off the stalks. You can do the same thing with the chard. And cut them smaller if you want to. But because these shrink down so much, you can leave them pretty big. So while those are wilting down, I'm going to slice up some garlic. In Andy's recipe, he recommends, if you have it, to use green garlic, whole green garlic stems and bulbs. And those are usually available in the springtime. You can find them at the Prescott Farmers Market. And they're just immature garlic that you can just use the whole bulb. The cloves haven't formed yet, and they don't have the paper around them. So you just slice the bulbs whole. So I'll just because we don't have any green garlic this time of year. So we're just going to use some whole cloves, but slice them thinly. And this will help to disperse the flavor of the garlic throughout the dish, but it won't be really intense. Like if I chopped these up really small, the garlic would kind of be overpowering, and you don't want that to happen. So I'll throw in about half of these garlic cloves with the chard, and also some lemon slices. And Andy calls for, in his recipe, if you find Meyer lemon, which is like a cross. I think it's a cross between an orange and a lemon. So it has a little sweeter taste, but a nice citrusy flavor. you can use those. And again, this time of year, we don't find the Meyer lemon around so much. So just a regular lemon. I bought an organic one because we're going to be putting the skin in here, and I just washed it well, and that's my preference when you're using the whole lemon, is to get an organic one. So, and I'm just going to let that sizzle a little bit and slice up the rest of the lemon. And we'll use these when we put the dish together. We're going to add the lemon and the garlic in just a little bit. And that's it. We're just going to do that, and then also use some saffron to flavor the dish. And saffron has a unique flavor and aroma. It's floral because it's the part of a specific crocus. It's called a saffron crocus, and it's actually a part of the crocus called the stigma. And they're so fine, and these have to be hand-picked. So that's why when you go to buy saffron, you think, wow, looks like it's really expensive. And it is, but you only use a little bit. So this is really all I'm going to use in the dish. Is a little less than a teaspoon probably, just that much. If you don't have saffron, no worries. You can just leave it out or use a different spice. Like you could use Hungarian paprika in this. That would be really delicious. I'm just going to take this off the heat just for a second. Or, like I said, just leave it out. So I'm going to crush the saffron with the side of my knife. If you have a mortar and pestle, you can use that. And you'll see it's this lovely yellow color, yellow orangey color. And I'm just going to add that to a little bit of water. And we'll pour this on right before we put it in the oven, because we're going to finish this dish by baking it. So there's my saffron. Give it a little stir. And next is we're going to put salmon on top. So salmon is a wonderful source of omega-3 fatty acids, which is a super important fat for your brain. And this happens to be wild-caught salmon. And they're just fillets that I seasoned a little bit with some salt. That's it. So I'll place these right on top of the greens and the lemons. And then top it with the rest of the garlic and the lemon slices. I want to make sure to put that right on the fish, because this will really help to flavor that fish really nicely. And then we're going to pour on some olive oil. So we're going to poach the salmon not in a water-based liquid, but in oil. It's a really nice way to cook fish. It gives it simmers. It's going to simmer in the oven at a really low temperature. And the oil helps to keep the moisture in the fish. It's a very, very nice way to cook it. There's a fair amount of oil going in here. I'm pouring in a half a cup. And I know that sounds like a lot, but you're not actually going to eat that whole half cup of oil. It's really there as a cooking liquid. And it's also a really healthy oil. So one thing we do know absolutely is that your brain needs fat. It's one of the parts. It's an essential part of all the cells in your brain and for neurotransmitter function. Except we want to make sure those fats are healthy. So olive oil is a really good source of healthy fat, as is the salmon and other types of seafood. So I've got that. Next, I'm pouring the saffron water in there. It's going to color it nicely and add this really sweet, almost floral flavor. And then toss on some fresh dill, just roughly chopped, on top. And then this goes in the oven. And you'll just bake it for about 20-25 minutes at 325. And that's all there is to it. And when it's done, I'll show you what it looks like. So it looks like this. So there's this lovely lemony, garlicky sauce, and those greens really, really cook down a lot. So feel free to use more greens if you want to. Just really fill up that pan because they shrink so much. And yeah, it smells lemony and garlicky with that hit of dill. Just a super easy way to cook fish. You could use other kinds of fish in this preparation as well. Really, any kind will work. And we're going to serve it with some wild rice. So one thing we know too about brain health is that starches are important, and you want to choose starches that are high in fiber and have a lot of nutrients in them, because we know that really helps with our blood sugar control. Because when our blood sugars are steady, that actually helps your brain function. So wild rice takes a little while to cook. This is the brand that I used here today. It's called Red Lake. And authentic wild rice is hand-picked and also what we call hand-parched or wood-parched. So what they do is they pick the rice by just tapping on the stems. It's really just a tall grass. And then they dry it, usually by on a wood fire. And it gives this really nice color and kind of a smoky, sweet flavor. And it takes a little while to cook because it is a whole grain. So if you're cooking it on the stovetop, use 1 cup rice to like 3 cups of water, and you just bring it to a boil and then let it simmer for about an hour. But if you don't have an hour, you can cut the time in half by using a pressure cooker. So I use the same ratio. There's 1 cup of rice in here and 3 cups of water, and you just bring it up to pressure. And it takes just about 30 minutes to cook. And it's really beautiful when it's done. And again, it has this really kind of woodsy, sweet aroma and just a tiny little bit of crunch. So this can see where those grains just start to open up. And it's a wonderful grain, wonderful. Wild rice is a little bit lower glycemic index than other types of rice. That means that it doesn't spike your blood sugars as much. It means that that starch digests really slowly. So again, so brain cells first, we need some healthy fats, and those cells need that fat to communicate, and especially those omega-3 fatty acids, especially one called DHA. And that's found in abundance in fatty fish like salmon and sardines, herring, anchovies, mackerel. Arctic char is actually really yummy, and lake trout, also in shellfish. You can also find some of those omega-3s in sea vegetables, so algae and seaweed. Also green vegetables, land vegetables have a little bit of omega-3s. You can find omega-3s in flaxseed and walnuts, and organic soy, like organic tofu, has some of those really healthy fats. With seafood, I always recommend trying to buy seafood that's sustainably farmed or wild caught in a sustainable manner. And there's a wonderful resource called Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch. They have a handy guide you can print out, and it helps you find the healthiest seafood products, so those that are sustainably caught or farmed. The other thing that's really important to your brain is protein. So we know that protein really helps us make neurotransmitters. So those are the chemicals, the messages in the brain that the brain sends back and forth to your body and internally. And we also know that protein, we need to have integrity in those brain and nerve cells. So protein is actually part of those cells. And there's been a really good couple studies that look at protein. One found that middle-aged to elderly people who ate a moderate amount of protein each week, and moderate was 2 to 3 servings of fish and maybe 3 to 4 servings of meat, with a serving being like the palm of your hand, so 3 to 4 servings, 3 to 4 ounces. They had a reduced risk of dementia over 10 years. And also in a smaller study called the MIND study, they also found a correlation between reduced risk of dementia and adequate protein intake. That would be meat, fish, poultry, beans, nuts, seeds. So the interesting thing about these 2 studies is that protein intake was truly moderate. So really 3 or 4 ounces a day of some sort of animal protein or some beans, nuts, seeds was really helpful. So the amount of protein that most Americans eat is probably 3 or 4 times as much as that. And we know that if the protein goes up, we actually have increased risk, or we can have increased risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Another really important part of your diet is to get green vegetables. That's why I love this recipe, because we've got our healthy fats, we've got our protein, and lots of green vegetables. And we know that green vegetables are actually associated with lower risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease as well. So a full, wholesome diet, lots of color, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lots of phytochemicals, enough protein and healthy fats. We know that that's really good food for your brain. And not surprisingly, those foods contribute to better overall health and the prevention of diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and other chronic conditions. So they help to keep our mind sharp and our memories intact, and likely, again, help to prevent Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. So remember to check out dozens of delicious nutrient-packed recipes that support your mind and body at the Your Healthy Kitchen blog at yrmchealthconnect.org. And each recipe has been created or curated to be easy and affordable, and most feature locally grown ingredients. And you can follow me on Facebook too at YRMC's Your Healthy Kitchen, where I post photos and videos of the meals I make at home, plus links to my favorite food and gardening destinations on the web. So until next time, eat well and think well, and we'll see you soon.